Humanity had long spread its reach across the stars, settling on distant planets, constructing vast space colonies that hovered on the fringes of the known universe. Earth was a distant memory for many, its once verdant lands now reduced to a barely whispered history. The people of the stars had evolved, adapted to life beyond their home world. They were more than survivors now. They were pioneers, explorers, architects of their future. But in their audacity, they had made an enemy: the Evrael. The Evrael, an ancient and advanced alien race, had studied humanity from the shadows for centuries. They had watched as humans reached the stars with the tenacity of a species that refused to be kept in the cradle of their home planet. And yet, the Evrael had underestimated something crucial. Something they couldn't predict, no matter how sophisticated their algorithms became: human chaos. Captain Mara Hensley sat alone in her quarters aboard the Ceres, a massive starship that served as both a research vessel and a military cruiser for the expanding human colony. Her dark eyes reflected the dim light of the navigation console, fingers absent-mindedly tapping a rhythm that no one else could hear. She was a strategist, a problem solver, and above all, a survivor. But what did survival mean when your enemy could predict every move you made? That was what the Evrael believed. That was their great error. Her mind raced, replaying the transmission she'd received earlier that day, an ultimatum. The Evrael demanded that humanity either join their interstellar federation or face annihilation. To them, this was a simple calculation. They believed they knew humanity. They believed that a species so rooted in chaos and unpredictability would bend, would fall in line, would seek peace in the face of a superior power. Mara, however, was not so certain. She had studied chaos theory, the mathematical framework that described systems governed by randomness and complex, unpredictable behavior. She knew that humanity wasn't something that could be calculated or controlled, no matter how much the Evrael might try. A soft ping broke her reverie, a message from the Ceres command deck. "Captain, we've received the Evrael's response," came the voice of her second-in-command, Lieutenant Rios. "They want us to meet them in neutral space. They've set a rendezvous point." Mara leaned back in her chair, feeling the weight of the decision before her. This was it, the moment humanity's fate would be sealed. She stood, her boots clicking against the cold metallic floor as she moved to the command center. Rios looked up as she entered, his expression unreadable. "What's our move?" he asked. Mara paused, her hand resting on the edge of the console, staring out into the endless void beyond. For a moment, she felt the weight of humanity's future resting entirely on her shoulders. The Evrael had no understanding of humanity. They believed they had us figured out, but Mara knew better. Humanity thrived on unpredictability. It was what had driven their evolution, what had allowed them to survive the chaos of their own world and beyond. They weren't like the Evrael. They couldn't be controlled. "We go," Mara said, her voice firm, but with a hint of something else, something like defiance. "We'll meet them, and we'll make them understand just how much they've underestimated us." Rios raised an eyebrow, a half-smile forming on his lips. "You're not planning anything chaotic, are you, Captain?" Mara glanced at him, her lips curling into a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Would you expect anything less from humanity?" The ship began its long journey to the rendezvous point, and as they approached, Mara couldn't help but wonder if this would be humanity's final stand. Would the Evrael crush them with ease, or would they become the latest to fall victim to humanity's unpredictability? The question lingered in the air, heavy with the promise of impending danger. The stage was set, and in the vast expanse of space, under the cold gaze of distant stars, the Evrael would soon learn that chaos was not something to be calculated or predicted. It was something to be feared. The Ceres drifted silently toward the neutral space station designated as the meeting point. It was an imposing structure, a sprawling network of geometric shapes, designed not to impress, but to intimidate. The Evrael were nothing if not practical, their aesthetics a direct reflection of their advanced and sterile technological culture. Captain Mara Hensley stood on the bridge, her hands clasped behind her back, her eyes fixed on the looming structure ahead. The rest of the crew was tense, the hum of the ship's engines the only sound that filled the otherwise silent room. Everyone knew what was at stake. Every decision they made, every word they spoke in the coming moments would echo across the future of humanity. "You're sure the Ivrael will adhere to the terms?" Lieutenant Rios asked from his station, his voice betraying a hint of doubt. He had served alongside Mara for years, but even he couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter might unravel everything. "We'll find out soon enough," Mara replied, her voice steady, but a shadow lingered behind her words. She'd studied the Ivrael for years. They were a proud species, bent on precision and logic, believing that with enough data, any outcome could be predicted. But Mara knew there was always a variable that couldn't be accounted for: humanity's unique ability to throw everything into disarray with sheer will. The ship's automated systems pinged, signaling their arrival at the docking station. The series gently latched onto the station's docking bay with mechanical precision. The station was bathed in the soft, eerie glow of artificial lights, casting long shadows over its metallic surfaces. The air inside felt sterile, cold, alien. Mara took a slow breath, steeling herself. The Ivrael were a species of vast intelligence, but they had never truly understood the unpredictable nature of human behavior. Today they were about to find out just how wrong they were. The Ivrael delegation was waiting in the docking bay. Their leader, a tall, angular figure with smooth, almost translucent skin, stepped forward. His presence radiated an eerie calm, the very embodiment of alien serenity. His eyes, though devoid of human warmth, studied Mara with a calculating intensity. "We are pleased that you agreed to meet on neutral ground," the Ivrael leader said, his voice like the soft hiss of 1,000 whispers. "I trust you understand the consequences of defying our will." Mara stood firm, meeting his gaze. "We understand the consequences of your demands," she said, her tone laced with quiet defiance. "But humanity does not bow easily." A flicker of surprise passed through the Ivrael's features, but it quickly vanished, replaced by the cold calculation that was their signature. "Your defiance will be your undoing, Captain Hensley," he said. "We have studied you. We know your weaknesses. We know your fears. You cannot escape the future we have predicted." Mara felt a pulse of discomfort, but she kept her expression neutral. The Ivrael believed they knew everything, every human impulse, every decision, and perhaps in the short term they did. But Mara had lived long enough to understand that the future was never as predictable as anyone thought, no matter how advanced the technology. "I'm sure your predictions are flawless," Mara said, her lips curling into a thin smile, "but I'm afraid you've missed something fundamental." The Ivrael leader tilted his head, curiosity flickering behind his cold, unreadable eyes. "What is it you believe we've missed?" Mara met his gaze without hesitation, the weight of humanity's legacy pressing on her shoulders. "The one thing you can never calculate is chaos." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning, yet impossible for the Ivrael to fully comprehend. To them, chaos was an anomaly, something to be eradicated through control, through order. But Mara knew better. Humanity had lived through chaos for millennia, thrived in it even. It was their greatest strength, and it was something the Ivrael could never predict. Before the Ivrael could respond, the calm of the meeting was shattered by an unexpected event. A sudden burst of static filled the room, followed by the harsh crackle of an emergency alert. A nearby ship, one of the smaller, human vessels, had been boarded by Ivrael soldiers. Their intentions were clear: to force compliance. Mara's heart raced. This was it. The Ivrael had decided they were through negotiating. They had underestimated humanity's refusal to be manipulated, and now it was time to see what the human spirit was truly capable of. She turned sharply to Rios, who had been monitoring the situation from the command deck. "Prepare the ship for immediate departure. We're going in." Rios hesitated, his fingers hovering over the console. Captain, we're outnumbered. We don't have the firepower to... We have something far more dangerous than firepower. Mara interrupted, her voice cold and resolute. We have chaos. The Evrail delegation watched, their faces unreadable, as Mara moved toward the airlock, her crew falling in line behind her. They hadn't expected this. They hadn't expected humanity to react with unpredictability, such an explosive force that it would unravel their carefully laid plans. But as they prepared to board their ship and race into the fray, Mara knew, one thing for sure, they had made a grave mistake. Humanity was never meant to be calculated, it was meant to surprise, and in that surprise, there lay its greatest power. As the airlock hissed open, and the series moved toward the edge of the station, Mara's voice echoed through the comms, low and commanding. Let's show them just how chaotic we can be. The series was already in motion, cutting through the void at an almost reckless speed as it made its way toward the Evrail ship. The hum of the engines was deafening in the silence of the bridge, but Mara barely noticed it. Her mind was focused on the unpredictable series of moves that were about to unfold. The Evrail thought they had humanity pegged, but they had underestimated the one thing that could never be calculated: human ingenuity, driven by pure chaos. The ship shook as they entered the enemy's firing range. Red warning lights flashed across the consoles. Rios, his face tense, swiveled in his seat. Captain, we're entering their direct line of sight. We can't outrun them, and they're locking onto our weapons systems. Mara's gaze was steely. We don't need to outrun them, Lieutenant. We just need to keep them guessing. She quickly turned to her comm officer. Open a secure channel to all human ships in range. Get the message out. We are not just a species of predictable choices. We can play their game, but we don't play by their rules. The comm officer's fingers flew over the console. Message sent, Captain. Within moments, the system seemed to explode in a flurry of activity. Other human ships scattered across the system activated their engines in erratic patterns. Some of them dropped shields, while others shot off in completely random trajectories. It was chaos, pure and undiluted. The Evrail had no idea how to respond. Predict this, Mara murmured, more to herself than anyone else. The Evrail ships, which had once seemed like an insurmountable wall of precision, now found themselves lost in a sea of human unpredictability. Their weapons fired sporadically, aimed at decoys, as human ships shifted directions with a dizzying, chaotic rhythm. For, once the Evrail were the ones caught off guard, this won't last, Rios warned. They'll adapt eventually. They won't, Mara said with quiet certainty. Because the one thing they'll never grasp is that we don't need to win in their terms. We just need to make them doubt themselves. But even as Mara's plan began to unfold, a new complication arose. On the outer rim of the station, a Evrail warship appeared, its dark silhouette more intimidating than any human vessel. It was larger, faster, and by all indications had been waiting for a chance to strike. That ship's a command vessel, Rios said, eyes wide. It's far more advanced than anything we've seen so far. Mara's pulse quickened. This wasn't just a battle of tactics anymore. This was survival. We don't play it safe. We keep them guessing. The enemy ship fired its first volley, but before the Evrail could calculate where the series would go, Mara made an unprecedented decision. She ordered the crew to drop all shields and engage the thrusters at full power. The series veered sharply to the left, moving in the opposite direction of the Evrail's trajectory. Direct hit incoming, Rios shouted, but the shot missed by mere inches. For a split second, the Evrail system seemed confused. They hadn't anticipated such a reckless move, humanity's willingness to sacrifice everything, even their own safety, to confuse an enemy. It was chaos at its finest. The Evrail responded immediately, recalibrating their weapons and targeting systems. The human ships, though, had already vanished into the void of space, moving at impossible angles. No one knew where they'd appear next, not even their own commanders. But the Evrail were not without their strengths. They adapted quickly, recalculating their strategies, relying on the precision of their advanced algorithms. It didn't take long for them to regroup and focus, On the series, now a rogue element in the chaos. They had recognized the unpredictability of humanity, but they were still confident in their ability to bring it to heel. Captain, they're locking onto our hull. We won't last much longer if we don't do something drastic, Rios warned. Mara's mind raced. She had to create a plan, something that would force the Ivrael to lose all confidence, something so unexpected that it would break their resolve. She turned to her comm officer again. Send out a message, broadcast it to all ships. Tell them to expect a... She paused, her mind flickering through possibilities. Then it hit her. A surprise. She turned to Rios. We're going in. Prepare for the most chaotic maneuver you've ever seen. Rios's brow furrowed. Captain, what are you... Before he could finish, Mara activated the command sequence. The series began to decelerate, but instead of retreating, it turned sharply, heading straight toward the Ivrael flagship. The ship's sensors were overwhelmed by the sudden change in velocity. The Ivrael, expecting a feint, had no idea that the real threat was the unpredictability itself. Are we insane? Rios exclaimed. We're human, Mara said with a grin, and that's the problem. The series dove into the heart of the Ivrael fleet, its engines firing randomly, veering between ships, creating confusion with every pass. They couldn't track it. They couldn't predict it. It was the very essence of chaos embodied. As the ship barrel rolled through the fray, Mara could feel the crew bracing for impact, but it was the chaos of human nature that made the ship unpredictable, enough to survive. The Ivrael were closing in on them, weapons charging, but the damage was done. The human fleet had grown bolder, embracing their instinct to confuse, to trick, to outwit. And the Ivrael, they were beginning to lose their certainty. You're going to love this, Mara muttered to herself, her fingers flying over the console. There it was, the surprise, a counterattack so random, so unpredictable, it would leave the Ivrael reeling, and, in that moment Mara realized she was no longer playing a game of tactics. She was playing a game of survival, and chaos. Chaos was humanity's greatest weapon. As the first volley of fire ripped through the Ivrael fleet, Mara had no illusions that they would win this battle in the conventional sense. But she had something the Ivrael would never understand. Humanity's ability to fight without rules, without predictability. In that chaotic, beautiful mess, they would find a way to survive. The series tore through the heart of the Ivrael fleet like a comet in the night sky, a chaotic force of unpredictable human defiance. The Ivrael flagship loomed large ahead, its surface a seamless mesh of cold, metallic design, efficient, elegant, and utterly devoid of spontaneity. But Mara knew one thing the Ivrael could never have anticipated: their inability to comprehend the unpredictable nature of humanity. Mara's fingers danced across the console, the ship's controls barely responding to the barrage of incoming fire. The series was barely holding together, its hull shaking with every near miss. The crew braced for impact, but Mara's eyes were laser-focused, her heart pounding in her chest. This wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a statement, a declaration that humanity would never bend to the will of a superior power, no matter how logical, no matter how advanced. We're down to 20% shield strength, Rios said, his voice tight with fear. We can't take another hit like that. Then we make them miss, Mara replied through gritted teeth. Again. A series of chaotic movements followed, as the series veered to the left, spiraling just in time to avoid a deadly beam of plasma. The ship's random velocity changes, the erratic turns, and the sudden bursts of speed had thrown the Ivrael's targeting systems into complete disarray. They were no longer dealing with a predictable opponent. They were dealing with something wild, something that could not be mapped or calculated. On the Ivrael flagship, Commander Varith, the leader of the alien fleet, watched the unfolding chaos with growing frustration. He had studied humanity for centuries, and his people believed that with enough data, the future was nothing more than a series of probabilities. But Mara Hensley was proving them wrong. The series had become a living embodiment of chaos theory, a force the Ivrael couldn't predict. It wasn't just the series, it was all of humanity. And they were playing the Ivrael's game not to win by their rules, but to win by the sheer unpredictability of human nature. Predict this, Mara muttered under her breath, her hands tightening on the controls. The series began to spin, its engines firing in all directions as it tore through the Ivrael fleet like a riddle no one could solve. In the distance, smaller human ships swarmed like bees, launching feints and counterfeints that left the Ivrael ships in a perpetual state of confusion. Each shot fired by the enemy missed its mark. Each maneuver was anticipated a second too late. The Ivrael were getting desperate. They had expected humanity to fold under the weight of their power, to bend to their will, but instead they were facing a species whose strength lay not in technology, not in tactics, but in something far more dangerous: human will. A pulse of static filled the comms, cutting through the chaotic battlefield. It was a message from the human fleet, and Mara's eyes locked onto the screen as the transmission began. "We've calculated their weakness," came the voice of Commander Quinn, one of the senior officers aboard the Vanguard, a large human warship. "They rely on precision. Let's break it." Mara's lips curved into a grim smile. "Break it? No, we'll shatter it." With a swift command, she initiated the final phase of her plan. The series dipped into a wild loop, spiraling toward the Ivrael flagship, which by now had begun to fire indiscriminately at everything in sight. The series was hurtling toward them at impossible angles, a darting, unpredictable force. There was no calculated path to follow, no clear trajectory. It was madness, sheer, beautiful madness. "Hold on," Mara barked as the ship slammed through space in a series of random trajectories that no combat AI could have predicted. The series collided with a smaller Ivrael vessel, a glancing blow, but it was enough. The Ivrael flagship, thrown off balance by the sudden impact, began to falter. In its defense systems, the chaos Mara had unleashed was working. The Ivrael were no longer sure of where the next attack would come from, nor how to respond. "We've got them," Rios said, his voice tinged with disbelief. "They're scrambling." But then, just as the series was about to make another sharp turn, something unexpected happened. The flagship, now disoriented and vulnerable, fired a massive plasma beam. It was an all-or-nothing shot, designed to tear through any ship in its path. It was aimed directly at the series. There was no evading this one. Mara's heart raced. She could feel it, the shift in the air, the weight of inevitability. But as the beam powered up, something deep within her rebelled. Humanity did not go down quietly. It never had. In that final moment, she made a decision. "Evasive maneuver," she shouted, but there was no time. The series had only one option: to charge headlong into the blast. "Prepare for impact," Rios yelled, but Mara wasn't afraid. Not anymore. She slammed her hand onto the comms panel. "All ships now." At her command, the human ships in the area began to surge toward the flagship, moving in erratic, unpredictable paths that jammed the Ivrael's firing systems. As the Ivrael prepared to fire the final shot, they found themselves facing not just the series but a storm of human defiance. The plasma beam, aimed at Mara's ship, collided with one of the human decoys, exploding in a brilliant, catastrophic flash of light. The flagship, its defenses shattered by the unexpected attack, faltered. Mara's ship, shields nearly depleted, slipped past the wreckage in a flash of raw, chaotic brilliance, narrowly avoiding death by inches. And then, for a moment, everything stopped. The battlefield fell into a stunned silence. The Ivrael flagship, crippled by the unrelenting randomness of human will, began to drift, its massive form faltering as its systems spiraled out of control. The remaining Ivrael vessels, now leaderless and paralyzed, struggled to reorient themselves. "We've done it," Rios said, his voice soft with disbelief. "We actually did it." But Mara didn't answer. She stared at the screen, the image of the crippled Ivrael flagship burning in the background. This wasn't victory in the traditional sense. There was no neat resolution here, no easy answers. The Ivrael were reeling, but the war was far from over. What mattered was the statement they had made. Humanity would not be calculated. Humanity would never be tamed. As the series drifted away, a message flickered across the comms, this time from the Evril commander, his tone devoid of the confidence it once held. "You have won, this time, Captain Hensley. But know this. The chaos you embrace will one day consume you." Mara didn't flinch. "Let it," she replied softly, knowing that the battle was only the beginning. "Let it consume us. It's what we do best." And as the remnants of the Evril fleet slowly pulled away, Mara's mind drifted to the larger question that hung in the air like a distant star. What would humanity do next? Would they become the great disruptors of the galaxy, forever defying the orders of the more powerful? Or would their chaos, this glorious, unpredictable chaos, be their ultimate undoing? For now, Mara didn't have the answers. But one thing was certain. Humanity had shown the galaxy what it meant to be truly free, and that was a lesson the Evril and the universe would not soon forget. The stars glimmered outside the windows of the series, their cold light flickering against the ship's battered hull. The bridge was quiet now, the chaos of battle fading into the past. The Evril fleet, once so confident in their superiority, had withdrawn, their ships retreating into the black void from which they had come. The series, though battered, had survived, along with the human fleet scattered across the vast expanse, their unpredictable strategies having turned the tide of battle. Captain Mara Hensley stood at the helm, her hands resting lightly on the control panel, eyes scanning the space ahead. There was a sense of quiet in her bones, a stillness that belied the chaos that had just unfolded. They had done it. Humanity had beaten the Evril, not with might, not with superior technology, but with something far more dangerous, something they could never have prepared for: chaos. The weight of what they had accomplished settled heavily on her shoulders. The universe was vast, and the Evril were only one of many forces that could threaten humanity's survival. But for now, Mara allowed herself a moment to breathe, to savor the fact that humanity had turned the tables. Rios approached from behind, his footsteps slow but measured. "Captain," he said, his voice tinged with something Mara couldn't place. Relief, perhaps, or something deeper. "We did it, against all odds." Mara turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "We didn't just win, Lieutenant. We sent a message." He nodded slowly, his eyes reflecting the weight of their actions. "A message that won't be forgotten, I think." Her gaze shifted to the view screen, where the scattered remnants of the Evril fleet began to fade into the distance. The Evril had underestimated humanity. They had believed their predictions, their logic, would contain humanity's potential. They had thought that chaos was a weakness, a flaw, but now it was humanity's greatest strength, a strength they could wield when everything else failed. "What now?" Rios asked, his voice a little softer, as if seeking her guidance. The future of humanity uncertain and vast. Mara paused, staring into the infinite expanse of space before speaking. "Now we rebuild, and we prepare. This isn't over, not by a long shot. The Evril will regroup and others will come. But what they don't understand is that humanity isn't about winning battles. We're about surviving them. We adapt, we learn, and we make sure the odds never stay the same." Rios nodded, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "It's who we are." Mara's lips twitched into something resembling a smile, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "It's who we've always been." The rest of the bridge crew had gathered by now, their faces a mix of exhaustion and triumph. They had all witnessed the unthinkable, the collapse of the Evril's precision, the unraveling of their carefully laid plans, and they had been a part of it. Together they had made the impossible possible. "Captain," came the voice of the communications officer, breaking the quiet moment. "We're receiving a transmission from the Galactic Council." Mara straightened. The Galactic Council was the governing body that oversaw interstellar diplomacy, a collection of the most powerful and advanced civilizations in the galaxy. Humanity, until now, had been seen as little more than a wild card, a species struggling to find its place in the galactic order. But today, they had made their mark. Mara stepped forward, her pulse quickening with both anticipation and caution. Put it through. The screen flickered to life, revealing the stern faces of the Council's representatives, a mix of alien species, some humanoid, some not. The Bu, leader of the Council, an imposing being with an elongated neck and shimmering scales, spoke first, his voice a deep, resonant tone that carried both authority and curiosity. Captain Hensley, he began, his eyes narrowed. Your actions against the Ivrael have not gone unnoticed. You have shattered their perception of your species. The question now is not how you defeated them, but why. What are your true intentions, humanity? Mara's heart pounded in her chest. She knew this moment was critical. How she answered would define humanity's role in the galaxy moving forward. The question was simple yet profound. What were humanity's true intentions? We're here to survive, Mara said, her voice steady and clear. We're here to learn, to grow, and to carve out a place for ourselves in the universe. We don't seek domination. We seek the freedom to determine our own fate, and that freedom will always come at a price. We're unpredictable, we're chaotic, and we'll never stop fighting for what's ours. The council members exchanged glances, murmurs of approval and concern rippling through the room. The leader of the council nodded slowly, his eyes reflecting a mixture of awe and wariness. We see now that humanity is not as simple as we once thought, he said, his voice softening slightly. You are not a species to be controlled. We will watch you closely, Captain Hensley, as you carve your path through the stars. The galaxy is vast and there will be more tests ahead, but we will remember your message. Mara met his gaze without flinching. Then you'll understand. We're not afraid of the tests, because we've always been the wild card in the deck, and we always will be. The transmission ended, leaving an eerie silence behind. The crew exchanged glances, some with awe, others with concern. Humanity had not only survived the first trial, they had earned the respect and fear of the galaxy. As Mara looked out the viewport, watching the distant stars twinkle like 1,000 eyes, she couldn't help but wonder what came next. The Ivrael might have retreated for now, but this was only the beginning. There would be more, so much more, waiting out there in the unknown. But one thing was certain: humanity would never be contained. Not by anyone. Not by anything. We're not just survivors, Mara said softly, almost to herself. We're disruptors, and we always will be. The series continued its journey through the stars, heading into uncharted space. And though the future was uncertain, one truth rang loud and clear. Humanity's place in the galaxy was no longer one of submission. It was one of power, and the universe would never be the same again. Months passed, and the series found itself once again on the fringes of known space, charting unknown territories. The crew had settled into a rhythm, their bond forged through the trials they had endured. The scars of battle still lingered on the ship's hull, but they had become something of a badge of honor. One quiet evening, as the stars stretched out before them in endless rows, the communication officer called out from his post. Captain, you might want to see this. Mara approached the console, her fingers hesitating over the controls. A message had appeared on the screen, cryptic, garbled, and without a sender. But as she deciphered it, her brow furrowed. The message was unmistakable, its contents clear as day. The true test is yet to come. Watch the horizon, Captain Hensley. The galaxy is full of secrets, some of them far darker than you can imagine. The transmission ended as abruptly as it had appeared. Mara stood there for a moment, the weight of the words pressing heavily on her chest. There was more out there, more to discover, more to fight for, and more to survive. The galaxy was vast, full of mysteries and threats beyond their comprehension, and humanity had just begun to scratch the surface. Set course for the unknown, Mara ordered, her voice steady. We're going to find out what's out there, and will show them what it means to face the chaos of humanity. As the series moved forward into the dark void of space, one thing was certain: humanity's journey was only just beginning.